This secret military unit was so evil that its experiments were kept hidden for decades. It was a place where human lives had no value. From deliberate infections to surgery without anesthesia, what really happened behind the walls of Unit 731? Why did it take so long for the world to learn the truth? Today we're uncovering the chilling details of Unit 731, Imperial Japan's most notorious war crime. Before we get into the horrors of Unit 731, let's take a quick dive into Japan's history. From the early 1600s to the mid-1800s, Japan was cut off from the world by the ruling shoguns. This changed in 1853 when American naval officer Matthew C. Perry forced Japan to open up to international trade. The shock of modernization hit Japan hard, and they quickly transformed from a feudal society into a modern industrial nation. By the early 1900s, Japan had become a powerful military force, winning wars against China and Russia. Despite these victories, many Japanese felt they weren't being treated as equals by Western powers. This frustration and desire for recognition fueled Japan's aggressive military and expansionist policies in the 1930s and 40s. In this chaotic time, Unit 731 came into existence. Led by Shiro Ishii, this secret division was established in 1936 in Manchuria, China. It was officially called the Epidemic Prevention and Water Purification Department, but its real purpose was much darker. Unit 731 focused on biological and chemical warfare, performing horrific experiments on prisoners to create deadly weapons and explore the limits of the human body. The main victims were Chinese citizens, but prisoners from allied nations. The Soviet Union, Korea, and Mongolia also suffered. Around 3,000 men, women, and children endured unimaginable horrors within Unit 731's walls. This number only hints at the true extent of the cruelty, as many more suffered from the unit's field tests and biological attacks. The experiments conducted by Unit 731 were both numerous and extremely cruel. One of the most infamous was the freezing experiments. Prisoners were taken outside in the harsh winter and soaked with water until their limbs froze solid. The doctors then tried different methods to thaw the frozen limbs, often using warm water at various temperatures. This cruel treatment aimed to find the best way to treat frostbite, but it came at a terrible human cost. Guards would sometimes tap the frozen limbs with sticks, listening for the sound of ice to ensure they were completely frozen before starting treatment. Another disturbing practice was the dissection of live prisoners. These individuals, often infected with diseases like plague or cholera, were studied without any form of anesthesia. The goal was to observe how these diseases affected the human body before it decomposed. The victims, referred to as logs by the unit, endured immense suffering for the sake of so-called scientific research. This practice was eerily similar to the experiments conducted by Nazi doctor Joseph Mengele, who also performed inhumane procedures on prisoners. Unit 731 also experimented with various pathogens, including anthrax and typhus, on individual prisoners and entire communities. They conducted field tests by releasing these deadly agents on unsuspecting villages to observe how the diseases spread and impacted the population. One particularly alarming plan involved using balloon bombs to carry plague-infected fleas to the United States, though this effort ultimately failed. They even considered using kamikaze pilots to drop these pathogens on San Diego, showing just how far they were willing to go to cause widespread devastation. In one significant instance, the village of Kuzhou in Zhejiang province was severely affected by the bubonic plague, causing immense suffering and numerous deaths. The villagers also endured the rotten leg disease, likely caused by the bacterium glanders, which resulted in severe pain and flesh decay. This case shows the devastating effects of Unit 731's biological warfare on local communities. Unit 731 didn't stop at biological experiments. They also conducted extensive weapons testing. Prisoners were used as live targets to test the effectiveness of firearms, grenades, and chemical weapons. They were tied to stakes in open fields, while Japanese soldiers attacked them with various weapons. The aftermath was carefully examined to understand the damage these weapons inflicted. In one case, a gas attack went wrong, forcing the Japanese soldiers to flee as the wind changed direction. One of the more harrowing experiments involved pressure chambers. Prisoners were placed inside, and the pressure was gradually increased until their bodies could no longer withstand it, leading to fatal results. Another disturbing method involved spinning prisoners at high speeds to study the effects of centrifugal forces. These experiments were not just about testing weapons, but also about understanding human endurance under extreme conditions. The cruelty extended to abuse and forced pregnancies. Female prisoners were subjected to acts of violence to study the transmission of diseases. Pregnant women were infected with diseases to observe the impact on both the mother and the unborn child. These women and their babies were later examined in detail. Children born in the camp were subjected to similar experiments, and none are believed to have survived. The cruelty of these acts is beyond comprehension, showing the depths of inhumanity reached by Unit 731. One former worker recounted that children were infected with diseases, just to observe how the diseases progressed in their bodies, leading to painful and fatal examinations. When World War II ended in 1945, the horrors of Unit 731 began to come to light. Shiro Ishii and his team tried to destroy much of their documentation, but they couldn't erase all evidence of their crimes. Surprisingly, Ishii and many of his colleagues were granted immunity from prosecution by the US military in exchange for their research data. This decision allowed them to escape justice and live out their lives without facing consequences for their actions. The US claimed that the data could be valuable for future conflicts, a justification that remains controversial. On the other hand, the Soviets captured some of Ishii's men, but instead of executing them, they sentenced them to prison. By the 1950s, some of these men were even repatriated to Japan. This leniency, coupled with efforts by both Japanese and American authorities to cover up the atrocities, meant that many involved in Unit 731's crimes never faced any real repercussions. Unit 731 stands as a chilling reminder of the extreme cruelty that can occur during wartime. While the atrocities committed by the Nazis are well known and widely condemned, the horrors of Unit 731 are less familiar to many but just as horrifying. The testimonies of survivors and the limited documentation that exists shows the inhumanity that can happen when power goes unchecked. The story of Unit 731 is not just a chapter from the past, but a warning for the future. It emphasizes the importance of maintaining ethical standards in science and medicine, and being vigilant to prevent such atrocities from happening again. The victims of Unit 731 and their immense suffering must never be forgotten. Recent findings have revealed that Unit 731 worked closely with academic institutions in Manchukuo, the puppet state Japan established in northeast China. Medical universities in this region were not just complicit, but actively participated in the horrific human experiments and bacteriological warfare conducted by Unit 731. Young soldiers were trained at these universities before joining the unit to carry out their gruesome tasks. This shows how organized and systematic the crimes were, involving the military, academic, government, and medical sectors in Japan. Also, new documents have surfaced, detailing that Unit 731 also had intelligence agents. This indicates the broad scope and multifaceted nature of its operations. These records are crucial for understanding the structure of Unit 731, its operations during and after the war, and the responsibilities of those involved. The release of information from Japan's National Archives in recent years has shed more light on these dark events, but much remains hidden or lost to history. This secrecy has prevented full accountability and recognition for the victims. We must continue to uncover and remember these dark chapters of history, to honor those who suffered and to ensure that such inhumanity is never repeated. While many other atrocities have occurred throughout history, the actions of Unit 731 stand out due to their sheer scale and the involvement of so-called scientific research. This unit, under the guise of advancing medical knowledge, inflicted unimaginable suffering on thousands. The lessons from this dark chapter are clear. We must always strive to uphold human dignity and ethical standards, even in times of war. If you found this video informative, make sure to click on the next one.